I always thought I knew my wife, every little habit, every subtle quirk that made her who she was. I could tell when she was anxious just by the way she stirred her coffee, and I could sense when she was holding something back before she even opened her mouth. But somehow, despite all that, I never saw this coming. It was a regular Tuesday evening, the kind of day where nothing particularly interesting happens. I had just walked through the front door, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch, exhaling the weight of the day. Across the room, my wife, Emily, sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone. Her fingers were moving just a little too fast. "What's up?" I asked, stretching out my legs. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she locked her phone, set it down on the table face first, and folded her hands like she was bracing herself for a tough conversation. That's when I knew something was wrong. "Jason, I need to tell you something." I sat up a little straighter. "All right." She hesitated just long enough to make me uneasy, then took a deep breath, like she was gathering courage. "I'm going away this weekend." I frowned. "Okay, where?" Another pause. Then, carefully, like she had rehearsed it in her head, she said, "With someone." The way she said it, flat, cautious, sent a jolt of unease through me. My stomach tightened. "With who?" My voice had already lost its usual ease. Her expression didn't change. "His name is Adam." Adam. A name I had never heard before. A person who had no place in my world, in our world. And yet, here he was, dropped into my lap like it was just another trivial detail in her schedule. I blinked. "Who the hell is Adam?" She swallowed, shifting slightly in her chair. "Just a friend." "A friend. Right." My entire body went cold. No one announces a weekend trip with, "just a friend" like this. No one carefully chooses their words unless they already know exactly how it sounds. "And you're just telling me this now?" I asked, my voice edged with disbelief. Emily ran a hand through her hair, sighing. I didn't know how to bring it up." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "How about, 'Hey Jason, I'm planning a trip with a guy you've never met'? That would have worked." She didn't react. She just sat there, waiting for me to accept it, like this was something I was supposed to be okay with. "Tell me the truth, Emily," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Why are you really going?" Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, I saw it, a flicker of hesitation. "Because I want to." That was it. No reassurance. No excuse about a work event or a group trip. Just a simple, unshaken, "I want to." I stared at her, feeling the ground shift beneath me. She wasn't asking for permission. She was telling me. And suddenly, I had no idea who I was married to anymore. For a moment, I just sat there, waiting for her to laugh, to shake her head and say, "Of course I wouldn't do that, Jason. I just wanted to see your reaction." But she didn't. She just held my gaze, steady and unwavering, like she had already made peace with whatever was about to happen next. My fingers curled into fists against my knees. "You want to go?" The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth. She nodded. As if that was enough of an explanation. As if 8 years of marriage could be reduced to a single shrug and a simple, "Yes, I do." Something inside me tightened, coiling into something dark and unfamiliar. I pushed myself up from the couch, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "You just made up your mind without me? You decided, 'Hey, I'm going to spend the weekend with some guy my husband doesn't even know,' and that was that?" Emily sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I didn't want it to be like this." "Like what?" My voice was rising now, an edge creeping in that I wasn't sure I could control. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I didn't want it to feel like I was choosing." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "But you were choosing. And it's not me." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Regret. Guilt. I wasn't sure. She looked down at her hands, picking at her nails. "It's not what you think, Jason." I folded my arms, forcing myself to stay calm. "Then tell me what it is." She hesitated. And for a brief, stupid moment, I thought she might actually tell me. That she might finally be honest. But then she just shook her head. I don't want to fight. That was it. That was all I was going to get. I clenched my jaw. Then what do you want? Emily exhaled through her nose. I just need some space. I blinked. Space. She nodded. To clear my head. To figure things out. Something inside me snapped. You don't clear your head by running off with another man, Emily. She winced but didn't deny it. And that was all I needed to know. She wasn't even going to fight for our marriage. She wasn't going to try to explain or convince me that I was wrong. She had already checked out. A dull, hollow ache settled in my chest. How long has this been going on? My voice came out quieter than I expected. Her eyes darted away. Jason, I don't. How long? I repeated, sharper now. She swallowed, gripping the hem of her sweater. I don't know. Liar. She knew. She just didn't want to say it out loud. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself. When are you leaving? Emily hesitated again. And that told me everything. She had already packed. She had already planned this out. She had just been waiting for the right moment to tell me. Tomorrow morning, she admitted. A heavy silence fell between us. So that was it. 8 years of love, of building a life together, reduced to a single conversation in our living room. A conversation where I wasn't even a factor in her decision. I nodded slowly, feeling something inside me shift. Something irreversible. I had spent years believing we were a team. That no matter what, we were in this together. But now, I was realizing the truth. I was just a bystander in my own marriage. And Emily, she had already left. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even move from the couch. At some point, Emily went to bed, alone, without a word. I heard the soft creak of the bedroom door closing, the quiet rustling of blankets as she curled up under the covers. And me. I just sat there, staring at the blank TV screen, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, trying to process the fact that my wife, the woman I had built my entire life around, had just told me she was leaving. Not leaving forever. Not yet. But something about the way she said, tomorrow morning, felt final. Like she had already left in her heart. Like I was just an obstacle she had to step over on her way out. At some point, my thoughts became a blur, looping over the same questions, the same what-ifs. Maybe I should have said something different. Maybe I should have fought harder. Maybe I should have grabbed her shoulders and shaken some sense into her. But deep down, I knew the truth. It didn't matter what I said. Emily wasn't looking for a reason to stay. She was looking for a way to justify leaving. And now, I had to figure out what that meant for me. Around 5 in the morning, I finally moved. My entire body ached from sitting in the same position for too long, my limbs stiff and useless. I dragged myself to the kitchen, grabbed the coffee pot, and stared blankly as the machine sputtered to life, filling the silence with a hiss of brewing coffee. I was halfway through my first cup when I heard it. The sound of a suitcase zipper. I turned toward the hallway, my breath catching in my throat. And there she was. Emily. Standing by the front door, her luggage beside her, wearing that same gray sweater she always traveled in. The sight of her like that, so normal, so casual, made my stomach twist. She looked at me. Then at her bag. Then back at me again. I was hoping to be out before you woke up, she admitted. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course you were. She pressed her lips together. Jason, I don't want to do this like. Like what? I cut in. Like I'm supposed to pretend this is fine? Like I'm supposed to wave you off and tell you to have a great time with another man? She exhaled through her nose. It's not like that. Then tell me what it is, Emily. I set my mug down with a sharp clank against the counter, my patience wearing dangerously thin. Because from where I was standing, it looked exactly like that. She didn't answer. Because there was no answer. Nothing she could say would make this okay. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and forced my voice to stay steady. Where are you even going? She hesitated. Just for a second. The lake house. I frowned. The lake house. We'd been there before. It wasn't ours, it belonged to an old friend of hers, someone she used to work with years ago. Back in the early years of our marriage, we'd spent a few weekends there together. Back when things were still good. Back when she used to reach for my hand in the middle of the night just to feel close to me. And now she was going back. With him. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. This isn't the first time, is it? My voice was quieter now, but the weight of the question was crushing. She looked away. Jason, please. Just tell me. Her silence was all the answer I needed. I ran a hand down my face, pressing my fingers into my temples, trying to hold myself together. For the past 24 hours, I had been desperately convincing myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But I wasn't. I had been blind. Stupid. She had already left me. I just hadn't realized it yet. A car horn honked outside. Emily flinched. I laughed. A bitter, broken sound. Not even a proper goodbye, huh? She bit her lip, gripping the handle of her suitcase like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Then she turned, reached for the doorknob, and pulled it open. And that's when I saw him. Adam. Standing outside, leaning against his car like he had all the time in the world. No shame. No guilt. No hesitation about picking up another man's wife. The sight of him made my blood boil. He wasn't anything special. Just an average-looking guy in a leather jacket, his hands stuffed into his pockets, exuding casual confidence. But the way he looked at Emily, the way he smiled at her like she was already his, made my stomach churn. And the worst part? She smiled back. Like she had already forgotten I was standing there. Like I was just her past, and she was already stepping into her future. I clenched my fists, every instinct in me screaming to say something, to yell, to demand an explanation, to do something. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. So instead, I just watched. I watched as Emily rolled her suitcase out the door. I watched as she climbed into the passenger seat without a second glance. I watched as Adam shut the door behind her and walked around to the driver's side. And then, with a low rumble, the car pulled away. And just like that, she was gone. The sound of the engine faded into the distance, but the silence it left behind was deafening. I stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, staring at the empty street. The spot where her car had been was just pavement now. As if she had never been there at all. As if she hadn't just torn a hole through my life in the span of 24 hours. It didn't feel real. Nothing about this felt real. I had spent nearly a decade building a life with Emily. We had inside jokes. Traditions. A home. And now, it felt like she had been planning her escape for months. And I was just the fool who hadn't noticed the cracks forming beneath my feet. I finally stepped back inside, closing the door with a soft click. The house felt wrong. Like a crime scene. Like something had been taken, and all that remained were echoes of what used to be. I moved through the living room in a daze. The air still smelled like her. Faint traces of her perfume. The lingering scent of her coffee from the morning before. I walked past the dining table where she had sat last night, telling me she was leaving. Past the kitchen counter where we used to stand side by side, cooking dinner together. Everywhere I looked, she was there. But she wasn't. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I found myself walking into the bedroom. My bedroom now, I guess. I half expected it to be untouched, like maybe this was all a bad dream and she'd come back, laughing about the cruel joke. But the moment I stepped inside, I saw it. The closet. Her side was half empty. Not fully empty. Not wiped clean like she had erased herself from this house completely. No, she had left just enough behind. Just enough for me to notice. A couple of old sweaters. Shoes she didn't wear anymore. A necklace I had given her for our anniversary 3 years ago, now lying abandoned on her dresser like an afterthought. She had taken only what mattered to her, and left the rest behind. Like she had been shedding her life with me piece by piece. I stood there, staring at the empty space, my hands trembling at my sides. This was what it looked like when someone decided they were done. A quiet, cruel unraveling. And the worst part? She had done it so effortlessly. I turned away before the weight of it crushed me. I needed air. Grabbing my jacket, I walked out the front door, my feet moving before my brain could catch up. The moment I stepped outside, the cold morning air hit me, but I barely felt it. I just kept walking, down the sidewalk, past the neighbors' houses, past the familiar streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't my empty house. I ended up at a small coffee shop a few blocks away. Emily and I used to come here on lazy Sunday mornings, back when neither of us felt like cooking breakfast. I hesitated before walking in. But my body was on autopilot now. The barista greeted me with a smile. "Morning, Jason." "The usual." I blinked. I had been coming here for years, always ordering the same thing, black coffee, no sugar. Emily used to tease me about how boring it was. But now, the thought of drinking it made me feel sick. "Not today," I said. My voice felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. "Just give me something different." The barista raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right. How about a mocha? Something sweeter." Sweet. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I nodded. "Yeah, that works." I took my coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the street. People walked past, laughing, talking, living their normal lives. Meanwhile, mine had just been ripped out from under me. I sipped my drink, barely tasting it. Was she with him right now? Was she sitting in his car, smiling at him the way she used to smile at me? Was she already laughing about my reaction, telling him how dramatic I had been? The thought made my stomach twist. I had spent so much time trying to figure out how to save my marriage. But now, I realized something awful. She hadn't wanted to be saved. She had just been waiting for the right moment to walk away. And now she was gone. By the time I finally snapped out of my daze, the mocha in front of me had gone cold. The once welcoming warmth had faded, leaving behind a thin, unappealing film at the top. I hadn't even noticed how much time had passed. Outside the cafe window, the world kept moving. A mother wrestled a toddler into a stroller. A couple walked hand in hand, smiling at each other like nothing else in the world mattered. A businessman jogged across the street, a phone pressed to his ear, too busy to notice the way the sun hit the pavement just right. All of them, living their own lives, unaware that mine had crumbled beneath me. I took a deep breath. I needed to go home. But home didn't feel like home anymore. When I stepped back inside, the house felt emptier than before. It wasn't just the silence. It was the weight of her absence. It clung to everything. Her perfume still lingered in the air. Her coffee mug from yesterday still sat in the sink. The throw blanket she always used was still draped over the couch. It felt like she had evaporated, leaving behind only ghosts of who she used to be. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wandered aimlessly through the house, my brain still struggling to process that she was actually gone. A part of me expected to hear her voice at any moment, to hear the familiar sound of her footsteps, to see her coming down the hallway, tying her hair up in that messy bun she always wore when she was tired. But she wasn't coming back. I found myself standing in front of our bedroom door again. I hadn't slept in there since she left. Couldn't bring myself to. The bed felt too big, too empty. Instead, I had crashed on the couch, staring at the ceiling all night, my mind looping over the same questions. Had I missed the signs? Was there something I could have done differently? Had she ever actually loved me? Or had she just been waiting for a way out? I stepped inside. The closet was still open. The empty space where her clothes had been felt like an open wound. I walked over, reaching out without thinking, running my fingers over the remaining hangers. And that's when I saw it. A single t-shirt. She had left it behind, buried between the sweaters she never wore anymore. It was mine. One of my old college shirts, faded and worn, but still carrying the scent of detergent and time. I picked it up, my fingers gripping the fabric as something heavy settled in my chest. Had she forgotten it? Or had she left it on purpose? Was this some kind of message? A loose thread of the life she had unraveled? I pressed the shirt to my face, inhaling deeply. It still smelled like her. I squeezed my eyes shut, my grip tightening. How was it possible to be so angry at someone, so utterly betrayed, and still miss them at the same time? I hated myself for it. I forced my hands to unclench, dropping the shirt back onto the shelf. I couldn't do this. I couldn't let myself get lost in what-ifs and maybes. She had made her choice, and now I had to figure out how to live with it. I turned, forcing myself to walk away, to leave the bedroom before the weight of it suffocated me. I needed to get out of the house again. So I ended up at the grocery store. Not because I needed anything, but because I needed to be somewhere. Anywhere. I wandered the aisles without a cart, picking up random things just to put them back down. A box of cereal. A bottle of orange juice. A loaf of bread. None of it made sense. None of it felt important. And then I saw them. A couple, standing near the produce section. The woman was laughing, playfully shoving her partner as he held up some ridiculous-looking vegetable. She shook her head, grinning, and leaned into him. He kissed the top of her head without even thinking about it, like it was second nature. My stomach twisted. That used to be me and Emily. That used to be us. I turned away quickly, my throat tightening. I wasn't ready for this. I walked out of the store without buying anything, my hands stuffed deep into my pockets, my chest aching in ways I didn't know were possible. It wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing everything. The inside jokes. The easy affection. The unspoken understanding between two people who had built something together. Now, she was sharing that with someone else. And I was nothing but a footnote in her story. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had spent so much time trying to be a good husband, trying to be someone she could rely on. And in the end, it hadn't been enough. I took a shaky breath, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I never realized how much of my life revolved around Emily until she was gone. It wasn't just the obvious things, her clothes in the closet, the sound of her voice filling the house, or the way her perfume clung to the air. It was the small, invisible details that left the biggest wounds. The extra cup of coffee I instinctively made in the morning before remembering she wasn't there to drink it. The half-finished book on the nightstand that I had to shove into a drawer just so I wouldn't have to look at it. The random receipts in my wallet from places we had been together, evidence that she had been a part of my everyday life. And now, she wasn't. I felt like I was living in the echo of something that no longer existed. That first full day without her was the hardest. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had never thought of myself as the kind of person who needed someone else to function. I was independent. I had my own life, my own interests. But the weight of her absence was like a physical force pressing down on me. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the kitchen, even though it was already spotless. I did laundry, even though there wasn't much to wash. I went for a run, but every step felt heavy, like my body didn't understand why I was still moving when everything inside me wanted to stop. The truth was, I wasn't running from anything. I was waiting. Waiting for a call. A text. Some sign that Emily had realized she had made a mistake and wanted to come back. But the phone never rang. Not once. She had left, and that was that. No apology. No second thoughts. Just silence. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but around noon, I found myself driving. I had no real destination in mind, no plan, just an overwhelming need to be anywhere but in that house, drowning in my own thoughts. Without even realizing it, I ended up at the lake. The lake house. The place where she had gone. The place where she was right now. With him. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I pulled into a spot near the water. The lake stretched out in front of me, calm and undisturbed, a stark contrast to the storm inside my chest. I stared at the reflection of the sky rippling over the surface, my heart pounding. I could turn around. I could go home and pretend this never happened. But I didn't. Instead, I got out of the car, my feet moving before my brain could tell me to stop. I walked down to the shore, my eyes scanning the trees in the distance. I knew exactly where the house was, tucked away behind the tall pines, hidden from view. A place we had once shared, now occupied by someone else. The thought made my stomach churn. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, breathing in the crisp air. I wasn't sure what I had expected to happen. Maybe I thought I'd see her step outside, laughing at something he said, looking at him the way she used to look at me. Maybe I thought I'd hear her voice carried by the wind, proof that she had moved on faster than I could even comprehend. But I saw nothing, heard nothing. The house remained hidden, silent, as if it didn't want me to see what was happening inside. And maybe that was for the best. I swallowed the lump in my throat and turned back toward my car. I had to let go. Not for her. Not because she deserved my understanding. But because if I didn't, I was going to lose myself completely. That night, I tried to sleep. Tried and failed. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The mattress felt too big without her beside me. For 8 years, I had grown used to the rhythm of sleeping next to Emily. The way she always curled up on her side, her back pressed against mine. The way she mumbled in her sleep sometimes, half-formed thoughts slipping from her lips. Now, the only sound was my own breathing. A hollow kind of quiet. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, I was dreaming. I was standing in our house. But it wasn't our house anymore. It was empty. Stripped of everything familiar. No furniture. No pictures. Just bare walls and cold floors. And then I heard it. Laughter. I turned. And there she was. Emily. But she wasn't alone. She was standing with him. With Adam. They were smiling at each other, lost in their own world. I opened my mouth to say something. To ask her why. To demand an explanation. But she didn't even look at me. She just turned, took his hand, and walked away. I tried to move. Tried to call out to her. But my feet wouldn't budge. And then I woke up. My chest was tight. My heart was pounding. It was just a dream. But it didn't feel like one. It felt like a warning. A glimpse into a future where I no longer existed in her world. A future I had no choice but to accept. Morning came. But it didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like an extension of the same endless night. The same heavy silence, wrapping around me like a vice. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but suffocating. I didn't move for a while. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Feeling the weight of everything settle into my bones. I should get up. I should eat something. I should go to work. But none of it felt important. Because while the world continued to spin outside my window, mine had come to a screeching halt. Emily was gone. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. She wasn't thinking about me right now. She wasn't wondering how I was doing. Or if I had eaten. Or if I was struggling to get through the day without her. She was somewhere else. With someone else. Living a life that no longer included me. And the worst part? She had chosen this. She had looked at our life together, at me, and decided she wanted something else. Something better. The thought made my stomach churn. I finally forced myself to get up, dragging myself to the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. My eyes were hollow. Dark circles etched beneath them. My hair was a mess. My jaw was covered in rough stubble. I looked like someone who had been through hell. Because I had. I turned on the sink, splashing cold water on my face, as if that would somehow wash away the reality of what had happened. It didn't. Nothing could. I spent most of that day in a haze, moving through the house like a ghost, unsure of what to do with myself. At some point, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring at my phone. A part of me wanted to call her. To ask if she had even thought about me since she left. But I didn't. Because I already knew the answer. Instead, my fingers hovered over her name in my contacts, my heart pounding. And then, before I could stop myself, I clicked on our messages. The last text she had sent me was from 3 days ago. Can you grab some milk on your way home? That was it. The final words she had written to me. Not I love you. Not I'm sorry. Just a request for milk. Like I was nothing more than a convenience. I let out a slow breath, my grip tightening around the phone. I should delete her number. I should block her. Erase every trace of her from my life. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because no matter how much I hated what she had done, a part of me was still waiting for her to reach out. even if I knew she never would. Later that afternoon, I decided to go for another drive. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. To do something, anything, other than sit in that empty house, drowning in my own thoughts. The roads blurred together as I drove, my mind wandering. And then, before I even realized what I was doing, I was parked outside a small diner. I didn't even remember making the decision to come here. Emily and I used to go to this place all the time. It wasn't anything special, just a little roadside diner with greasy food and cheap coffee. But it had been ours. A place we had shared. A place where we had been happy. I hesitated before stepping inside. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, the smell of bacon and coffee filling the air. A waitress glanced up from behind the counter, offering a polite smile. "Seat yourself, hon." I nodded, making my way toward a booth in the corner. Our booth. The same one we had always sat in. I slid into the seat, my fingers tracing over the worn tabletop, memories flooding my mind. I could still see her sitting across from me, laughing as she stole fries off my plate. Still hear her teasing me about how I always ordered the same thing, black coffee and a burger, no matter the time of day. Still feel the warmth of her hand resting on mine, back when she still wanted to hold it. But those moments were gone now. Nothing more than ghosts. A waitress approached, notepad in hand. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" I almost ordered my usual. The same thing I had always gotten with Emily. But then I stopped myself. I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't her husband anymore. She had made sure of that. I glanced at the menu, my throat tightening. "Just surprise me." The waitress raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right. Surprise it is." I leaned back against the booth, exhaling slowly. I didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know how to be without her. But maybe it was time to start figuring it out. The waitress returned a few minutes later, setting a plate down in front of me. "Chef's choice," she said with a wink. "Enjoy." I looked down at the plate. Pancakes. Thick, golden, drizzled with syrup. Not at all what I had expected. But something about it made me smile. Emily would have laughed if she were here. She always said I wasn't a breakfast for dinner kind of guy. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe I had just never given myself the chance to be. I picked up my fork and took a bite. And for the first time in days, I actually tasted something. Maybe it was just pancakes. Maybe it was just food. But in that moment, it felt like more. It felt like a choice. A choice to start again. I sat in that diner longer than I expected, sipping coffee, watching the world move around me. And for the first time since Emily left, I wasn't thinking about where she was. I wasn't picturing her at the lake house. I wasn't imagining her in his arms. I was just here, living, breathing, existing, on my own terms. And that realization hit me harder than I expected. Emily leaving hadn't broken me. It had hurt, yes. It had shattered everything I thought I knew about love and trust and commitment. But it hadn't destroyed me. Because even though she had walked away, I was still standing. And I wasn't just standing. I was moving forward. A few days passed. Then a week. Then 2. I went back to work. Started going to the gym again, just to clear my head. Picked up an old hobby, woodworking, something I hadn't touched in years. At first, it was just a distraction. But then it became something more. It became mine. My own space. My own project. My own little world that had nothing to do with her. And little by little, the weight of her absence started to lift. One morning, I woke up and realized something. I didn't check my phone for her texts anymore. I didn't wait for a call that wasn't coming. I didn't wonder if she missed me. Because it didn't matter. She had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. It was a Saturday when I finally did it. I went into my contacts, scrolled down to her name, and hovered my finger over delete. I hesitated. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I still loved her. But because this was it. The final step. The real goodbye. And then, with a deep breath, I pressed delete. And just like that, She was gone. For real this time. That evening, I went back to the diner. Not because I was sad. Not because I was trying to relive old memories. But because I wanted to. Because it was my place now. I sat in the same booth. Ordered a coffee. Watched as life moved around me. And that's when I saw her. Not Emily. Someone new. She was sitting a few booths away, alone. Flipping through a book, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee. She caught me looking. And for a brief second, I almost looked away. But then she smiled. A small, warm, open kind of smile. The kind of smile that said, "Hey, I see you." And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.